Welcome, welcome, Dylan. Lovely to catch up again. Um, you're in Ireland, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, all the way from Ireland, XL Talent, and I'm. You did say New Zealand, but I'm from the Gold Coast in Australia.
My bad.
All good, all good. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Obviously, we know each other. We follow each other on TikTok. We're both heavy fans of each other's content on TikTok and what we're both talking about and how we communicate with artists in the Web 2 space. We're both heavily interested in Web 3 as well
Yeah,
at the same time. And I just wanted to bring you on because whether you knew or not, I look after a bunch of artists in Web 3, but also trying to help them learn about Web 2, and then just trying to be a guiding light in the Web 3 space. What I wanted to connect with you is I actually saw a TikTok of yours just talking about where you didn't basically an interview with a conversation with yourself where you're playing the two
yeah,
characters, and it's just an artist talking to their friend about whether they feel like they should put more work into their career or whether they should start pushing their content a bit harder. And I really got a conversation going in my head, and I felt like I should get you on and have more of a conversation with you and pick your brain a bit. But before we do that, I'd love to get yourself to intro yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do with XL Talent.
for sure. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
No worries.
Um, my name is Dylan. I run a music marketing agency called XL Talent now for the last year or so. I also manage a year old artist from Northern Ireland called Crim. I'm also based in Ireland. And yeah, I have the pleasure of being able to work with artists day to day. Their primary social media is our TikTok, of course, at XL Talent. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
How did you get started in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was finishing up college towards the end of the pandemic, and I knew that I really wanted to get into music. And really, the pandemic, everything closing down was a catalyst to getting started because for a while, obviously, the whole world wasn't really sure what to do. Everything kind of closed down and everyone was at home. And that's really what kickstarted everything. I ended up moving in with some of my friends, some of which who had already been working in the music industry, and that's really how everything got started.
All right, cool. And then so from the pandemic, like you started an agency with your friends, or you just worked for someone that you'd met?
Yeah, no, so we started the agency, but what I'd say is we started working on the agency rather than we started the agency. The idea was to eventually start running the agency, but initially starting out, there was a lot of testing, just working with artists that we knew in our network, doing whatever we could to help them. And then eventually, I'd say about a year and a half later, once we felt like we were ready, then we started to advertise our services and officially launch.
Yeah, it's kind of we had a very similar beginning where I with Together Agency, my Web 2 business. um, I felt like I had a lot to give uh, to artists and to sort of help them. You find a lot of artists struggle with mindset. Confidence is a big thing, and and I've always had the ability to find and understand what's good, like music that is good and music that will connect with people. Uh, and when you find an artist that has that, you look at them and you get confused about why they can't then connect with fans. And it's
Hmm.
because generally it takes so much of a person to create music, number one. So they have to give so much of themselves to like write the music, produce the music to get it all going. So you kind of forget that part, and you're like, why aren't you doing these things that will help you better connect with those people around you to actually push your music? And it's because they're concentrating so much on actually creating the music. So I find like people like ourselves are kind of there as that guiding light to go, hey, like there's still this is a business. You still have to take care of these other things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. Um, and even for myself as well, it really did stem from a place of wanting to help artists. I'd actually started helping some of my friends, years before we got serious about getting into the music industry. And my friend used to always say to me, he said, "You're either going to end up being an A&R or you're going to end up being a manager." Um, and that's eventually kind of what ended up happening. But similar to yourself, I just loved helping artists. I love music, obviously, and whilst I had very little to no musical talent, the one thing that I was able to do was I was able to identify talent, or I was able to hear what's good, or
Same.
I had very strong taste,
Yeah, yeah. I
or
think
strong opinion, shall we say?
yeah, I think we're definitely from the same ilk. I actually very early on started out doing events, and I
Hmm.
managed to always connect with and book the right artists at the right time. But everyone always asked me because it was in the those kind of stages where CDJs had just started to pop up, and it was becoming a this is a decade ago or a little bit longer when CDJs had just started. So it was becoming a little bit easier to DJ. Turntables were kind of being phased out a little bit there. So everyone was like, "Oh, you should start DJing. Like you run the party." And that was kind of the thing. Like the promoter DJ was becoming really popular. But I had a
Hmm.
very strong opinion on that where I felt I could never be taken seriously. If I was going to be an artist, I had to be an artist and I couldn't be the event organizer and I couldn't manage people and I couldn't do these other things and be the DJ because it would just kind of confuse the situation too much. So I took a stance early on and decided to never do it. And I never really had, same as you said, I never really had any of that musical talent. But I did end up DJing much later. But before that, I just had the strongest vibe about preferring to look after artists more so than to necessarily try my hand at promoting myself.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that makes a lot of sense, and it's funny how it can just be a natural progression because at that time I had no intention of entering into the music industry. And I would kind of laugh at him when he would say these things. And it wasn't until years later that it actually became realized.
um, enough about both of us, though, I suppose. Let's get into the nitty gritty of why we're here. I just wanted to see for you, like, what do you have a particular? So let's just say you find an artist
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, I think you've got it, but your content's shit. What what's your first conversation? What do you go with? Do you have a particular content strategy, or do you go and meet with the artist and decide their vibe, go with their look? Like, how do you go through that process when you initially discover someone and decide that you guys as an agency want to take them on and want to work with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an important distinction to make because your manager hat is a bit different to your marketing hat
Hmm.
for various different reasons. But yeah, in terms of identifying talent, like to be honest, initially we did do some outreach and stuff. But what I found to be more effective over time is creating our own content and then seeing what artists enter into the funnel, what artists express interest, and kind of taking it from there. So I'm lucky in that sense.
Hmm.
Whilst when it comes to management, it's a bit of a different situation. You have to go out and find the artists. But what I would say is that when we do have these conversations with artists or when we have those initial touch points, you're just trying to analyze everything that the artist is going on. And you're also asking questions just to see, to essentially try and qualify the artist because, at the end of the day, the artist needs to be in the position to be able to leverage our services.
Okay.
So, are they in a position where it makes sense for us to work together? Because essentially what we can offer is we can help you, save time based off our experiences. And, that's really the selling point of what we do. So some of the artists that we work with, for example, they already have a successful music career and or they already have a successful business, and with their spare time they want to make sure that they're doing the right things, um, and they want to get the most out of whatever time they have during the week, and that's why they work with us.
Yeah, so
But
this is something that I actually bring up a lot in my own content is identifying in that early stage of being an artist whether you feel like you have the time to do the content, and if you don't, just get a job. Like if you don't feel like it's a strong um, if it's something that that comes to you naturally or comes to you easily, then maybe it is to look at someone like yourselves and go, okay, well, how do I do that? Well, I need to do a job, so I'm going to work 4 days a week, and then the other three I'm going to commit to doing music, and at night I'll do my music as well. But XL Talent will help me with my content strategy and my ads, so that way I know that that's taken care of. But I'm also, earning the money to make sure I'm paying for it. Is that the kind
yeah,
of people that you like to work with?
yeah, absolutely. So some artists that we work with fit into that category, and then other artists are full-time musicians or full-time artists already, and yeah, they just want to be able to help work with us so that we can help them amplify what they're doing. But to give an example of you know where it makes sense, I think in that conversation that you referenced, if you want to save time, energy, and money, you want to focus on your artistry with the time that you have, as opposed to learning how to set up Facebook ads and everything that goes into that. That's not the best use of your time. That
100%
doesn't
fact.
but that also doesn't mean that that's not something that's
You should
useful
learn.
to an
Yeah.
artist. Absolutely. And the same thing with email marketing, CRM. These are the kind of things that creatives typically don't consider when they get into music, because they're setting themselves up as a business. And we kind of come in and we essentially plug in and try and help bolster artists in these areas.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic when you're talking about having to learn so many new skills, and it is that constant conversation of like as you become an artist, you are essentially a business. So you have to look at accounting, marketing, strategy, all those things, and as you said, you don't fucking is it the best use of your time as an artist that's looking to break into the industry? Probably not. So you have to identify, well, number one, I feel like you still should learn the basics of those things because you need an understanding so you're not getting screwed over by someone
Hmm.
that the industry is full of people ready to take your money.
Yeah.
um, but in the same instance, yeah, I definitely don't, I've never thought it's a good a good time spent for an artist to do all those things essentially. Um, we just had I got a couple of people popping up here in the questions here, and I thought
Hmm.
I'd ask this one, uh, and hopefully I get it right. This is from a friend of mine, Graveyards. Uh, what's your thoughts on burning through content in sacrifice of actual creativity? So I presume here he's saying what we were just talking about essentially, which is like, do you feel like an artist should spend time on creating content in sacrifice of their music slash creativity time?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good question. And these are the things that artists need to take into consideration. And it's also part of the reason why artists work with us, because artists these days are expected to wear so many hats. There's so many things that you need to be proficient in. And what we offer is, like, if we're working with an artist, what I could do potentially is I could send you what's trending on TikTok. I could show you artists that you could reference your content on. Um, and it's not that you need to sacrifice, your creativity, because I think what happens when artists get burnt out around content and things like that, it's not that they're not capable of doing it. It's that the set of systems and the mindset around it are not as efficient as it could be. And that's where we come in. We come in to help you improve your efficacy and take some of that time. Like, oh, this is the type of content you should be making. These are the hashtags you should be using. These are the times you should be posting. And once you take all of that thought out of the process, This is your strength. You should be doing covers because your voice is what sells you as an artist. Was this artist might be a good, dancer, for example, and they might be able to promote their music around a dance. Not that I really want to go down that rabbit hole with some of the stereotypes on TikTok, but typically different artists
It
can
is
promote.
playing to your strengths, though.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Playing to their strengths, and
yeah,
sometimes it can be really helpful to have somebody who comes in and tells you all those things, because it saves you so much more time. And then, oh, what about batching content, or and just basically finding a way that it works for the artist. Because yeah, you don't want a situation where the artist is getting burnt out or is sacrificing their creativity and putting it all into the content or in other areas when it needs to go into the music.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting. You say that, like even mentioning that efficiency, the batching content, that they're two things that I believe in heavily in the content space. And it was my personal breakthroughs in those areas that it made me realize the power of them as well. It's like once you hit that spot where you realize you have to show up consistently, then it's like, okay, well, how do I scale that backwards into a place that's comfortable inside my life? And I reached that point when I was like, okay, well, this is what I want to commit to. Well, how do I come up with that? Well, I need to then schedule in 1 day a week where I can record, like write, record, come up with essentially all of my content for the week. And then I know that if it comes to me during the week, I can do a couple more here and there if I like something. But during the week, what I'll do is, if I'm on TikTok as well, I save ideas in separate folders. So this will be a duet. This will be a stitch. This is an idea for a rant, and you can start to look at and find other people's content that as you said, you're doing the same thing. You're sending it out to an artist, and you're like, hey, I feel like you are like this person. You might disagree. Come back to me and let me know and tell me where you feel like you might hit, and then we can find something a little closer that might still hit where you want to hit it, but still then reach back. Give it that bit of give and take. It's really,
Yeah,
really cool to hear you say that.
yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, it's a really interesting topic. One other observation I've had as well from working with a lot of artists, and this comes from being in the world of business and also being in the world of music. Um, and that's that a lot of creatives, in my experience, and it's not true in all cases, I am generalizing here, but artists oftentimes, because they are creative, etc., they tend to have much less structure in their lives, and they tend to be a lot more free flowing, which I guess makes sense as a creative. And I think sometimes they you know don't quite grasp the importance of having processes and that whole idea of efficiency. Um, and I really see this in parallel. Like when we work with business owners, like just to give an example, like I've worked with artists where they say that they can't go on a call during the day. Like they're mainly awake from say about 4 p.m. No, like 5 p.m. to about 9 a.m. or 10. Like you know what I mean? Like the opposite hours of any kind of functional business. And then business owners, you say, "Oh, can you do this?" And it's like, yeah, and it gets done, or they have systems and they understand how to be more efficient. And that is a generalization,
Hmm.
but that is sometimes my experience with artists is sometimes just due to their creative nature, perhaps. They're a little bit more free flowing, and I think sometimes that leads to things getting done last minute, or thinking that if I make content, I won't be able to make music. And it's like, no, you can make a TikTok in a minute if you just figure out, you know, how to how to do it. It's very very possible. Like to give an example of that real quick, um, I was in the studio with this artist that I worked with, Krim, and he was recording vocals, and I took a 10-second clip. Didn't think much of it. We finished the session. I've been just recording random 10-second clips, and we went for some food after the session, and we were just looking at some of the clips, and I was like, oh, well, I throw up this clip of you recording and say something like, this MF paid me $69 to record. Uh, just slap that caption on it, put it out. Took honestly about a minute to make. Like it was the one that ended up going viral. It got 10 million views. It was 1 minute.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely. I feel like the in a sense it's so difficult to sort of hit that middle ground when you're trying to explain something like that. Like what you've just said is simple and easy, and that's how it should be. In the same instance, though, the quality was still there because you're still recording. You know, there's still the audio there. You still spent the time. So even though it's quick, you haven't made shitty content. It's not distorted. You know, the image is clear, etc., etc. So there's like still elements inside that where you don't lose essentially the quality. The quickness is there, the quality is there, and you put it out, you know, without too much forethought. And I think that's where the perfect marriage happens. When people, I feel like the quality can sometimes get lost if you try to over edit it or if you try to do too much. I feel like sometimes you can lose the quality of it of content because you start to get into a space where you're uncomfortable. And that's the worst part is when you're creating content, especially for artists, is when you get into a place where you're not overly confident, you're not overly sure of what you're trying to do, and you overdo it, and people can kind of see through that. So I think in the early stages, like you said, it's kind of just banging up stuff and just testing out where you're comfortable, what works for you, and especially for artists, anything where you're recording, like people people forget. And I think it was shown. I mean, you might have seen the videos that I was releasing with that, and you would have seen the statistics on that recent Spotify Loud and Clear website that got put up. To have 8 million artists on Spotify, people forget how they aren't really against a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
So it's you're not fighting against the world. You're only really fighting against yourself in a space that in a genre like let's just say it's rappers in Ireland for for Crim in particular. Like you're not really competing against a massive market there, but he would feel like he's competing against the world, and that's the conversation that needs to be spread around a lot more. Is I feel like the content that an artist can create is always going to be so unique and so different and so exciting for people that aren't artists. Like I've I've never recorded a song, and there's not. I literally watched a clip of a jazz artist this morning. I fucking forget her name, Olivia, someone, and I watched the video of her performing live, and just her energy performing this song live. I went and listened to the original recording, thought it was fucking garbage. Went and found the live recording and like listened to that, and that's on my favorite playlist now. And that's the difference. Is I watched her this snippet of 20 seconds of her performing live at this jazz lounge, and I'm a fan. That's what it took. That's how quickly it can happen for someone to transfer from listener to fan, and that's what I feel like artists are forgetting.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, there's a whole lot of things there around perspective as well. You know, I think in some cases anyways, perfectionism can be part of the problem because obviously artists are their brand, and
Mm.
therefore they want any content to put out is to be very good. Like for example, artists spend an awful lot of time perfecting their craft. You don't just write your first song and put it out. Well, you can, but it's probably not going to be your best song or the best idea. You're probably better off practicing and writing more songs, and then waiting until you feel like you're ready to release your first song. Um, Now, there's also a counterpoint you can make to that, where the perfectionism in an artist can hold them back, and they can end up hold on too
Yeah,
long.
it's kind of that push pull in between
Yeah,
the
exactly. There's a push pull. Like I wouldn't say release your very first song that you've ever made in your entire life,
two.
but yeah, don't leave it too long as well. But yeah, when it comes to creating content, then I think some people have very high expectations of themselves, and it's like, well, it's TikTok. It doesn't matter. It's not that deep. It really isn't. And like getting good at making music, you have to make content, you have to make mistakes. It's all
It's,
part of the process. That's how you get better, is you do it consistently over time.
there's
And the upside is way bigger than the downside.
yeah, it's especially, you could say 5 years ago, there was an argument about whether it was that important, but I feel like now, 5 years later, it is super important to be able to. I don't know whether front-facing video like is necessarily a must, but to be comfortable on camera as a musician is a positive. Uh, and then it's like it just goes backwards from there. It's like, as you said, you just need to not be so precious in the instance of trying to promote yourself. Still, of course, look for quality, but quality is subjective. So make sure you're understanding what is on the platform already that you're promoting on, or what what is other people, what are other artists doing, what's the world doing, not necessarily how you want to break the mold, but how you can begin to understand and be a part of that process. And then from there, as you said, it's like not releasing the very first song you ever made. Well, you still, for your post, you put your first post up. Your first post probably isn't going to go viral, but if you work at it for the next month or two, you're going to have a really good chance of having your music heard by tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I'm just grateful that this platform exists for independent musicians, because you can create this content and distribute it for free,
Hmm.
and it can get seen by many, many people. There was a time where that wasn't possible. Like, it's completely free to use, and who knows how long we're going to be able to take advantage for that. Because only a few years ago, even 5 years ago, you know, it was so much more difficult to be able to get that kind of exposure from your content.
Hmm.
What platforms was it happening on? It was happening on YouTube, maybe a little bit on Facebook, but probably it wasn't as accessible as TikTok is, in terms of you can just take out your mobile phone, take a 10-second clip, and it can
Yeah,
potentially change the course of your career.
it's crazy to think that it's only been like 3 years with like the current wave of TikTok. Like it feels like it's been forever, but it's literally just been 3 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the other thing that I would say on that as well is, if you don't have any money as an artist, then I would say TikTok becomes, extremely, extremely important. You know what I mean? Because if you don't have any money and you don't want to make content, well, it's,
You're in
it's
a
going to
tough
be
spot.
tough. I'm not going to say it's going to be impossible, but it's going to be a lot harder than if you do make content.
Yeah, it's that constant conversation that gets spewed back at me, that your music should do the talking, and it's like, well, if no one hears your fucking music, how's it going to speak to anyone? That like you could simply release it on Spotify. That has worked and can work. It's a lot harder though, without
Yeah.
anything pushing it. If you couple releasing on a platform like Spotify with using TikTok, find some content that works that has your song playing in the background, then work with someone like yourself running ads on that
Mm-hmm.
content that's worked. Your chances dramatically rise with very little money spent. We're talking
Yeah.
about thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars. So it's about being smart and
Mm-hmm.
just not wasting your opportunities. Like there may be more opportunities like this in the future, but especially now TikTok's becoming, looking to become a record label essentially with sound on and then hiring A&Rs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they might start to curtail the algorithms themselves to start pushing it towards artists that they look after. So you have to be careful of how long you stay out of the game.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest warning I can put out for the next 12 months is like, if you want to have a crack, now's the time. Don't leave it too long.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with that. Yeah, on the advertising front, it's just case by case artists. For some artists, that will make sense. If you have disposable income
Hmm.
and you want to invest in your career, then that could potentially make sense for you. But in other cases, it's going to make more sense for you to just focus all your energy into creating organic content yourself. But ideally, we do want to see a hybrid approach because generally that'll lead to the best results.
Mm. Um, what are you finding has been working best currently for like your ad strategy?
Yeah, so generally, like I'm a big fan of taking a musical approach, and I simply just take the best part of a song or the most engaging part of a song, have the artist front and center. And the reason that we do this is because if you stumble across an ad this way and you like it, you have been introduced to the artist via their music, and you like their music. So you're not engaging with them because they're funny or for another reason. Um, and yeah, that's generally what artists want. So it's just about finding the right the right song and the right part of a song to be able to show off. Because it goes back to what you said about when you heard that jazz musician and you heard those 10 seconds. That's how quick it can take to turn a
Yeah,
listener to a fan.
it,
And yeah, it's about being
it,
strategic as well about it.
it wasn't for me even in that instance. It wasn't even just the song. It was her performance on stage, her attitude, and
Exactly.
it was like the mixture of the song, mixture with her swagger, and I was like, oh, this chick's cool, and then her voice going into the song. I was like, all right, that's it. I'm a fan. Sign me up. Where's the
And that,
t-shirts? I'll buy
and
10.
And that's exactly what we try and do. We focus on musical performance. Um, Now, it can be live, it can be in a live setting, or it can be recorded, or it can even be the impression of a live recording. But as long as we have the artist kind of front and center, showing off their talent, and once we're targeting the right people, and there's a strategy behind it. So we're not just putting this ad in front of people one time. We're following up, and we're also just bringing the consumer and the other side further and further into an artist's world. And the more touch points that you have, um, generally the closer the bond becomes between the potential fan and the artist. It's kind of like the listener's journey.
Yeah, for sure. The the kind of to sort of go off subject a little bit here, but still sort of stay on the
Mhm.
same point. I've been having a conversation the last week where I've been getting. I was recently listening to a podcast where we heard a statistic, and I fucking can't find the podcast again, so I can't find the exact statistic, which is it's annoying the crap out of me. We've been looking all week for this statistic, see if we could find it again, but it's to do with artists, especially in the early stages. Those like those kind of like big things coming posts. I've got a song coming out. It's going to dropping in the next month. Blah 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 blah. Like we'll look out for this. This year's going to be my year. Um, and then the statistic is basically the amount of people doing that early on and getting that dopamine hit of all the congratulations and all the adoration. Oh, cool! You got a song coming out. Oh, cool! Like you're going to be going on tour this year, and then you've already got it, so you don't actually need to follow through. Have you seen Have you seen much of that? Like this is just completely random conversation. Do you notice those kind of things? Because it's something that's like I've really started to hone in on and notice more, and I now watch those artists and wait to see if anything will come of what they say they're planning essentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's an interesting topic, and
I
yeah,
think
like
it's just rampant in the music industry in particular.
for sure. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who might get into music because they're interested in becoming an entertainer or they're interested in becoming famous. And yeah, generally, I tend to stay away from artists that are, giving it, they've even released anything or done anything because, yeah, it's a tough act to follow. You know, the statistics are not exactly in your favor, and there's a lot of things. I think a lot of artists. Again, this is controversial because there's two sides to this coin.
That's to say, even for what I said, that's so controversial. It's like, but it's as you said, I automatically know that an artist that says stuff like that and will pronounce and talk braggadocio, like go on
Hmm.
about what they're meant to do. It's like, well, I know you're most likely not going to do the work already.
Yeah.
And it's such a controversial thing to say, but that's like I've watched it happen for the last 15 years of myself being in the industry. I've watched it happen over and over again. So it's like
Oh yeah, for
it's
sure. I
not
mean,
it's not by mistake.
if I'm being totally, totally honest, I would say that generally I would dismiss, people like it's just kind of like a filter, in my brain where I'd kind of go, personally, I just watch on I look at what somebody's doing, not what they're saying.
Hmm.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, 100%. Um, I think we can pretty much almost wrap it up there. I just had a few more questions, or a few more like couple of things that I just wanted to chat about. One was obviously music NFTs and your thoughts on Web3. I was like trying to figure out a good question for you where, and I don't know whether you've gone that far into the rabbit hole, is like, do you feel like content strategies, have you identified a good content strategy for Web3 yet versus Web2? Like, do you feel they differ, or do you feel like, again, you would go into that bag of music video, front facing artist, and just connecting to them to the music NFT page? Or do you feel like you have to go down essentially another road first to get them to that place in sort of the music NFT space?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean,
And
it's
this
a
can be
good
just your thoughts. You don't have to,
no, for sure. It's a really good question. I think that there's many different approaches that an artist can take, and I think there's no right or wrong answers as of yet. I think one of the tricky things about an artist doing so is the fact that fan sentiment suggests that there's still a lot of misunderstanding around, or never mind misunderstanding. There's just a lot of people who aren't even aware of Web3, and there's a lot of like misconceptions, shall we say, about the space in general. So that's kind of the barrier you're gonna one of the
so
barriers you're gonna come up against, regardless of what
mm,
approach that you take. It's just the public perception essentially coming up against that. So I have seen artists have success on Twitter, because that tends to be more of a crypto native platform. Discord communities. I haven't seen too many artists have a lot of success with Web3 related content on TikTok. I have seen Web3 native content on TikTok and NFT native, but that's more so talking about the space in general. I haven't seen many artists who have had a lot of success, or a Web3 artist blow up on TikTok because they're making Web3 music content.
yeah,
So to
yeah, that's what I was trying to bring up just then when you can hear the music in the background. I was trying to bring up a recent one I made where a big collector from the space is talking about the possibilities of where the metaverse might go, and where in real life music events might get to, where you can actually be scanning, that kind of that AR filter where you could scan around the crowd and see what NFTs people are holding in the crowd.
Mhm.
Um, and the initial whatever TikTok decided that day, it chose violence, and it sent me to everyone that hated NFTs, and it was just, you could see the immediate hate and response from pretty much anyone that was a had not, you can tell that they've got no understanding of it,
Mhm.
or just don't want to. And I still feel like that's going to be another 5 years away those before the rate, just the general public start to have some sort of understanding of what the power of NFTs will mean for the music industry, or just general life. And you can just see it, especially as you said, you can see it in Web2 platforms like TikTok, where you want to speak about it, and it's kind of on the fringes there, like people are speaking about it, but there's still the general populace on the platform are pretty not down with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's just a lot of concerns, whether it's environmental concerns, concerns around hypercapitalism, um, and yeah, just people just generally not understanding how the technology works. And yeah, that's all part of the process. Like, unfortunately, there is some PR issues around Web3, NFTs, etc. Um, but yeah, who knows? Who knows where we'll land? It's certainly interesting though to see that Twitter are rolling out communities at the moment. There's a new tab at the bottom of the feed. Also, Instagram have started um, rolling out the NFT feature as well for limited number of creators this week. Spotify are hiring people with the job description, falling in within the realm of Web3. Uh, Warner have started experimenting with POAP. Universal Music, I'm pretty sure, launched some Bored Ape-based artists.
Yeah, we
There's
actually just connected with a Warner Music person in Australia that just got hired for Web3. He was just on Twitter, going around and found our podcast that we do, and connected with us. So it's definitely in the next 12 months is going to be very, very exciting for the music industry and being out here. And it's why I like to talk about it and try to attract artists to the spaces, because generally the people that are first are the winners, to any kind of space. Not necessarily the very, very first, because generally if you're very, very first, you're trying to forge a position and try to understand the technology. But I feel now that moment's passed, and now we're into the next phase of, if you plant a flag now, you could potentially have an opportunity to become a very big artist, in Web3. So it's very, very exciting.
For sure. I think right now the safest way for artists to explore the space is to try and do it in a Web3 native way. So things I'd encourage artists to do is to get involved in communities like Water and Music, which is one of the leading research Web3 native or Web3 music communities, to check out other cool Web3 music projects like Dreams Never Die, which is a record label DAO, or check out Sound.xyz or Catalog Works, which essentially allow artists to sell their music as NFTs. Now, each of these services will have their caveats, and they're more open services. Like those services are exclusive, but they're kind of some of the leaders in the space right now. But there are many other platforms to check out as well. You can check out Mint Songs. You can check out even general marketplaces like OpenSea is the most popular one at this current moment in time. So I definitely encourage artists to check out all those platforms. Check out, understand some of the values like community, for example. Check out some of the podcasts. Mint Songs is a great one. A lot of good Web3 music conversations happening on there.
Mm.
So by exploring these resources and by engaging with the community, you'll get a much better sense of what Web3 is actually about, what the conversations are in the space. Um, you know, and then you'll be able to make much more of an informed decision as to whether that's something that you want to personally get involved with or not. But yeah, I don't try and sell artists on Web3 at all. It's completely up to you. There's definitely opportunity there, but it's the same with creating content. For example, it's not for every artist. It does make sense, and I would strongly recommend it to most artists. But there are exceptions to that rule, and if you absolutely hate it, then there's obviously no
It's never
point
going
in
to
you.
work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's never going to work if you absolutely hate it. You didn't get into music because you hated it, or at least you shouldn't have. um, most people get into music because they love it and they really want to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's down to the individual artist.
I think in that kind of instance, those circumstances is where you have a conversation with an artist and you go, okay, well, you don't want to do the content. Well, it is going to be a little bit harder, but this is how we can do it. We're just going to outwork everyone else, in the sense of creating the volume of music that we can create. Where how our release strategy is going to look like. You can still do it without those things. It's just that you are just going to have to work harder than other people to do it. You know, it's
Yeah.
just there's just you have to come to those realizations, and that marriage in your head where you go, okay, well, I don't want to do that, but that's fine. And what
Mm.
can I do? What can I do that will help me? Okay, well, I can write a shit ton of fucking music. All right, sweet. Let's get to work.
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
Last question. Just wanted to leave it on this one.
Mhm.
If you could offer a tip for artists creating content in the current space, what would it
That's a good question. That's a bit of a loaded question because honestly, I could speak about this for 40 minutes.
be?
Um, one tip, one tip. I'd say just do it consistently. You know, if I had to say one tip, do it consistently. There's so many more tips that I could give, but if you're looking for one single tip, it's to just do it.
It kind of is the overarching theme of content creation is showing up consistently.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's one of the biggest challenges that artists faced is with all the noise, just being able to show up consistently and do the work. Whether it's content creation, music, connecting with fans, making that effort just across the board. That is the biggest challenge, is to be able to do that consistently, because there are so many barriers that we can come across. Not only from a technical standpoint, but also in our personal lives as well. And that's why it's really important to be able to get just show up every day and to learn how to do that.
It's why I'm such a big fan of batching content. Is even last week I had 2 days where I just really didn't feel like doing anything, but because I'd batched content, the content was already there, so I could post on those days. I'd already written the captions, already had the hashtags, already had the covers, music selected, video done, post. All I had to do was go, which one do I want to post? So it's I can't speak more highly of batching your content, because we all have down days and we all deserve days off. Like, you shouldn't be working every day, especially as an artist creating fucking beautiful music. Like, you need time to think about that creation, and time to react to that. And you can't always be sitting there wondering what your next TikTok's going to be. So you need to plan ahead, and be ready to weather any kind of storm. If, again, as Dylan said, that's the road that you want to go down. Not everyone has to do it, but you do have to be prepared to work harder than everyone else if that's not what you want to do. Thank you so much, Dylan. Been a fucking pleasure, mate, as always. I wish you all the best and look forward to chatting across TikTok as always. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks a million, Brock, for having me. It's been a pleasure. Have a good day.
You too, buddy.